Perfect. Okay. Well, so Nadia sort of chose the smashing the ARCP. I think it was Nadia. I don't want you guys to smash it, unless smashing is a good thing. I guess it is a good thing. Like sort of getting it done properly, right? I'm old school. So thank you very, very much for inviting me. I'm an international medical graduate, as Bijan said. I trained in Nigeria, did my house jobs, and then I came out here in, let's just say a very, very long time ago, when medical training in the UK is very different from what it is now. We certainly didn't have e-portfolios, and it wasn't a competency or capability-based training program then, more an apprenticeship training type of program. I did my PLAB exams, some placements, and I started working in Basildon, my first pediatric job, and then moved to London and completed neonatal training, and then started work as a consultant in 2001. Yeah, it's about 20 years ago now. My interest in education and training started really from when I was a junior doctor, running membership training programs, and actually helping the RCPCH sort out the exams at Hammersmith when I was working there. And I know, as you said very clearly, that the ARCP does cause a lot of anxiety and stress to a lot of trainees and trainers. And I have to say HEE as well. So it's a process that I think needs to be managed by all of us so that we can have an easier life and reduce our stress. But it's absolutely essential, isn't it? It's a mandatory aspect of our training. And actually now, although I said I started training when we did not have e-portfolios, actually as a consultant, I now have an e-portfolio, and I'm having to do MSFs and assessments and actually document my continued development annually. So we're not going to get away from it, whether you're a trainee or not. Anyone working in the NHS will have to have an assessment probably annually. So it is mandatory. All trainees registered on the training program must have an ARCP regularly. And this is something we have only realized, that we've got trainees that kind of slip through the net and not have it annually. The Gold Guide, the GMC Gold Guide, states that there should be no more than 15 months between an ARCP assessment, whether the trainee is actively in the program or out of program. And we'll talk a little bit about that probably perhaps when it comes to the Q&A. So as you said, it's an annual review of competence progression. It is a competency-based training program that that trainees are in now. It is a formal process that reviews the evidence that's presented by the trainee and their supervisors in their e-portfolio relating to the trainee's progress. And it's kind of like it's an assurance card. It's something that we can say to the general, all the stakeholders. So to the GMC, to the college, to the public, to your colleagues, to you, individually, that you are gaining competencies and capabilities at an appropriate rate and through appropriate experience. And where that's not the case, then what the mitigating factors are and how we can kind of get you back on track. So it is a governance thing. So what are the purposes really? Besides reviewing and recording evidence relating to a trainee's performance in the training program, it really is making a real final judgment about whether the trainee can move to the next stage of training or complete training. We never stop learning. We actually never stop training. So this is the formal training program. But of course, training is lifelong. But this is the way that junior doctors are trained in the UK, and in all specialties, the ARCP is what helps the trainee move on and complete training to get their CCT. And it's not just for trainees within the training program, but also trainees out of the training program. So trainees who are doing research, who are doing OOP-E's, and anything else that they're doing that is out of program, but may be contributing to the trainee's progress where approved. and we need to document that. If it's not documented within the ARCP, it doesn't really count. And this is really important as well when trainees say, oh, I'm not really ready for my ARCP. Just remember that your ARCP is also your revalidation tool, it's your revalidation mechanism. So it's the ARCP that provides advice. It's not the revalidation itself, but every time an ARCP is completed, the postgraduate dean, who is your responsible officer, so when you're not in training, your responsible officer is usually the medical director of the trust that you're working in. And so that's my responsible officer. So he makes recommendation to the GMC saying Anuputa is okay. It's okay to keep practicing. For trainees, it's the postgraduate dean, and the postgraduate dean relies on evidence from the ARCP to say this trainee is safe, or there's some issues and we're working with them. Now, in the past, ARCPs were sometimes held face-to-face. In London and in pediatrics, it's been very difficult to do this, even historically, just because of the sheer numbers. We are the biggest school in the UK with over 1,100, about 1,200 trainees. And so it's impossible to be able to see trainees, face-to-face. And so it's a process that happens completely in absentia. And what that means really is that you can't make any judgments outside of what the trainee's e-portfolio says about the trainee. So we have to review the trainee e-portfolio, and on the evidence that's presented at that time, make a judgment. And that's why the e-portfolio is an incredibly important tool for your training. And Emma will talk a little bit about that later. And it's also the ARCP that reviews the duration of training and decides the trainee's indicative CCT date according to what progress the trainee has made and predicted progress. And that's quite important for HEE to decide on numbers, recruitment, and how long trainees might need to stay in the program, etc. So it's an important tool for planning as well. I will, okay. What do I want to do now? Let's talk a little bit about preparing for the ARCP. I think really, if you're going to have a stress stressless, or reduce your stress for your ARCP, you want to start preparing really right from the beginning. So kind of, the minute you get your post, you start your post, you start your training. So let's say this is your first post, your ST4, and your preparation really starts from you getting fully acquainted with the curriculum that you are training with. And that's really quite important. I am struck by how many trainees don't actually go and check very carefully through the progress curriculum. It's not very long. But it's actually quite well structured with 11 domains and the key capabilities relating to those domains that have to be demonstrated by achieving learning outcomes. So you will all be hopefully start to be acquainted with that. And it's really important that you know what is expected of you for the level of training. So if you're ST4, what does the progress curriculum say about level 2 training, and what do I need to achieve in that period of time to get signed off and move on to level 3. So obviously, as I said, it really relies on the learning outcomes. So engaging early and regularly with your e-portfolio is key. So once you've set up your casing account, and Emma might talk a little bit about that, and you've got your account, you really want to be engaging with it regularly. I don't know, you can put it on your phone. I have never tried to put to access casing on my phone. I do it on my iPad, so I don't know how easy it is, but if it is, there's Wi-Fi everywhere now, and it's really quite important that you keep referring to your e-portfolio, putting documents, documentation in, reviewing where you are with your learning outcomes, And perhaps I think the RCPCA says 1 or 2 hours a week, but just have some dedicated time and just become really good friends with your e-portfolio. Don't go to your e-portfolio only when there's a problem, or when someone asks you about a meeting or something. Think of your e-portfolio as documenting your training journey. Yeah, so you know, your endpoint is CCT, is an outcome 6, is completion of pediatric training in the UK. But that journey will be different for everybody, and you want to make sure that your training journey is being captured on e-portfolio. So how well you're doing, and sometimes the bumps that you have, because you know life isn't always straightforward, whether we like it or not. Some bumps either because of the training environment. So the job you were given isn't great. Something's happened either in the unit or COVID disruption, clearly to training. We've all seen that. Or something has happened in your personal life that has impacted on your training. You've taken some time off, or you've had to come off night shifts, or you're not well. There will be all kinds of reasons why your journey might be interrupted. So you may be static for a bit, and you may accelerate for a bit. You may go slow for a bit, but you want your e-portfolio to be documenting your training journey and using reflections to kind of tie it all together to say, you know, this is why this bit of my training went really well, but this is why it's not going so well at the moment. And, you know, forgiving yourself and giving yourself that kind of room, just thinking about it as a journey. You know, sometimes you have a pit stop, don't we? You know, we have a long journey. It is a long journey. And sometimes you just go, you know, I'm just going to have to take it easy and have a pit stop. And sometimes you just, you know, the job is going really well, life is good, and you can accelerate. So just use your e-portfolio, not as a snapshot, but as a continuum. I think the key is quality, not quantity. So sometimes I see e-portfolios that are incredibly crowded, and I still can't tell from that e-portfolio what kind of a trainee I am assessing or reviewing. There's so much information, there's some good stuff in there, but it's all buried in just loads and loads of stuff. Every teaching session is recorded. I'm not sure what that teaching session has, what the trainee has gained from that teaching session. It's just really heavy, but actually just picking a few choice entries that really you say, what does this entry say about me? In relation to the level that I'm in relation to the learning outcomes or the key capabilities that I have to demonstrate. Does this say that I have met this learning outcome in domain, you know, sorry, it was meant to be 11 domains, not 12. You know, for communication, this incredibly difficult situation that I was in, where I had to speak to a family, I had to deal with social services. It was really, everything was really quite complex. I'm going to do a bit of reflection because I think this actually says just how far I have come as a good communicator or as a leader. You know, just think, what is this saying about me as a trainee? We are never going to meet you, the ARCP panel, or at least we're going to pretend that we don't know you, even when we do, because it's all about what you present in the e-portfolio. And it's a shame when I see e-portfolios for trainees that I've worked with or work with, and I know they're so much better than that. But I can't say anything, and I can't make any other judgments other than what is presented in the e-portfolio. So it's really quite important that I see a lot of PDPs, I think, that are, obviously your career aspirations part of that. And you know, you might want to be a neonatologist, that's fantastic. It's a noteworthy thing to be planning on being, or you might want to write a paper or whatever. But actually think about your PDP in relation to your to your learning outcomes as well, with regards to where you are in your level of training. Okay. So once you've set up your e-portfolio, you've identified, you've got your learning outcomes. I think it's actually the RCPCA that upload it now, depending on your level. So you'd have, you know, let's just say we're ST4, so the level 2 objectives will be up. And you should then plan your educational meetings. And I think planning again for these meetings, you know, your working shifts, your educational supervisor is busy. they too have very difficult work schedules, and just trying to find a time when you can meet can be a bit dicey. Now, it's easier with, I mean, it would have been difficult in the past to kind of get this meeting sorted out. And Bijan, you said hundreds of people had signed up. Now, if we were trying to meet face to face, this would have been very difficult. So you can use virtual meeting platforms to have your meetings. And so hopefully you can meet your educational supervisor early in your post. But before you meet your educational supervisor, get a clear idea of what it is, where you are in relation to the learning outcomes. Because for some of you, if not most of you, you already have vital experience. You already have some of those capabilities in relation to the learning outcomes. Now you need to demonstrate them to get them signed off, and demonstrating that them will come with workplace-based assessments and the feedback that you get from your educational supervisor and your peers. So you do your own self-appraisal, and when you meet with your ES, refine your PDP, talk about your previous experiences, what you already have achieved, and what you want to achieve in respect to those learning objectives for your grade of training. And that's particularly important if you really want to accelerate your training. And I know quite a lot of you want to do this because you already have banked some real key capabilities from your previous experiences, either within the NHS or in your home countries. So you want to make sure that you can make those pay, but they need to be documented clearly and evidenced to count. This is a very important point to put in your training post, and I will talk a little bit about the pitfalls with ARCPs and what gives the ARCP panel headaches, and then we send emails that kind of increase the stress for trainees. So put in your training post and allocate your ES. Sometimes you have a separate CS, clinical supervisor. So allocate them and then plan your meetings. And then together with your education supervisor, plan what evidence you want to put together. Like I did say, it's quality, not quantity. So just think, some, 2 hats, a couple of leader CBDs, the mandatory ones, you want to make sure you get that out of the way. So the safeguarding, when are you going to do the MSF? When in the post would be a good time? Towards the end of the post, are you there for a year? In which case, maybe wait for the second 6 months. Are you there for just 6 months? And do you want to sort of do it, just a few weeks before the ARCP? Reflective entries, think about a format for those. There is guidance on how you can do reflective entries, and I think everyone needs to find what works for them. I have my own preference, the who, what, why, kind of, asking those questions and then thinking about your immediate responses and then what you've learned from them, and whether you want to share that with your educational supervisor or anybody else that you feel safe to do so with, because sometimes some reflective entries are quite emotional and personal. So you don't have to share them, or you can share parts of them, but just think about how you want to enter them. Your skills log is really important, even if you're not doing a DOPS. Just because nobody saw you intubate, if you've intubated 5 babies, or you've done certain number of procedures, you can actually put in your skills log, and the ARCP panel do look at those. Make a realistic plan of how you're going to acquire this evidence, because if you need to do a lot and you're waiting for a short period of time to do those, then you're going to come a cropper, aren't you? So just think of a realistic plan of how you're going to get the acquired evidence. Do you have CBD clinics where you work? How are you going to get your CBDs done? Those are the most difficult, I think, assessments to get. Just plan ahead, and then have regular self-appraisal. I think do that formally. Just sit down, go through the learning outcomes, and think about where you are. Get feedback, seek feedback from your educational supervisor. It doesn't have to be a formal sit-down meeting, but just listen out to what people are telling you about how you are performing, because that is really the way you demonstrate your capabilities. So we are a capability-based training program. So it's not about loads and loads of workplace-based assessments. The feedback is also crucial. And that's why I think, for me, the MSF is really the most discerning tool, besides the educational supervisor's report, besides a well-structured completed educational supervisor's report. The MSF is key if it's done properly. So you've done that through the post, and hopefully the job has been going well, and you now know that your ARCP is, you know, the dates of the ARCPs. We will always tell you in London, at least, and I'm sure other schools would do so, when your ARCP is. We will give you notice. You would not just suddenly be told it's next week. So you already, if you're in London, you already know that the dates for the summer ARCPs, those of you who are having ARCPs this summer, is the 16th to the 30th of June. So we would have told you this sometime towards the end of April. I think the email went out. So when it's 4 to 6 weeks of the ARCP, depending on whether you're full-time or whether you've been on holiday and what else is going on in your life, then really purposefully review your progress against the learning outcomes and the evidence that you have gathered so far. Now, some of that evidence may be in a draft form, or someone hasn't completed the workplace-based assessment, the MSF hasn't closed, you haven't completed that reflective entry. You just need to look how far away are you from completing those? Who do you need to kind of jig along to complete that assessment? Or you need 3 more people to complete the MSF and close it. With your MSF, just always remember that your educational supervisor is a key member of the contributors to your MSF. And I think there is clear guidance from the RCP that you should have at least a third as consultants. So make sure that you get senior people contributing to your MSF, particularly if you are in level 2 or 3. Update your skills log, look at your reflective entries, and just think about your e-portfolio. I'm not there. What is my e-portfolio saying about me? And particularly if you're coming up to the end of a level of training, you're moving from an SHO grade to a registrar grade. Does this say that I'm ready? If not, what else do I need to do? And that self-appraisal is quite important. Make sure that the date of your training post is very clear on your e-portfolio, and any absences. So if you've had some sick leave, or for whatever reason you paused training during that time, make sure they're logged on properly in your e-portfolio. E-portfolio is trainee-led, so pretty much everything on e-portfolio you start. We have no way of changing anything. So if your post dates are wrong, we can't do anything about that. And when it comes to CCT, when the GMC, the college on behalf of the GMC is reviewing your training from the very beginning, they're going to look and see, this doesn't make sense. This ARCP doesn't link with this training period, and it's all lopsided. So really try and get it right from the very beginning. And then book a date to meet with your educational supervisor, again, remembering how busy they can be and how busy you can be, so that you both find a date that works and you're not scrambling for time. 2 to 4 weeks of the ARCP, well, you now need to start the trainee-led supervision report for ARCP. The college has just recently changed the forms, but there's a lot of information about this on e-portfolio, and Emma, I'm sure, will mention this. Review and document your progress in achieving the learning outcomes for the, why do I keep writing? Remember, it's quality over quantity, as we've already said. And once you've done that, and you've done your own self-appraisal, and this is a formal self-appraisal, you send the completed form onto your educational supervisor. And it's important that you give him or her some days before your planned meeting to review what you've written about yourself, to review the evidence you've presented, because they would not have seen your workplace-based assessments, read about that child with meningococcal septicemia that you managed, and they just want to sort of look so that they can form their own opinion before they meet with you. It's difficult to be looking at evidence when you really should be communicating and talking and discussing and agreeing, because that's what the meeting is for. The meeting is to say, well, I've looked at the stuff that you've presented, and I agree that this looks really good, but I wondered about this, and what about this? And that kind of thing. I just, I think, the ARCP panel may want a bit more. So your education supervisor and you can actually have spend that precious time discussing, not opening up the MSF whilst you're having the meeting. And then you need to create an ARCP folder. So I think a lot of the time when trainees have problems with ARCPs, it's really because they haven't taken the time to do some of the basic stuff. And it's not about their training, and it's not about even their documentation or training. And that's a shame, isn't it? If everything else is fantastic, but actually it's so unstructured when you open the e-portfolio that you can't find what you're looking for. And then clearly you can't, making that judgment call is very difficult for the ARCP panel. So we want you to create a folder. So for instance, it's Summer ARCP 2021. And in that folder, Form R needs to be put in, your CCT calculator and post pro forma, which is a list of posts that you've done, and exams and course pro forma at the minimum. Now, there might be other things that you need to put in. If you've been out of program, then you need an report. If you want to fast track, you need a fast tracking form. So it depends on your particular circumstances, but everyone should have a Form R CCT calculator with post pro forma, exams and course pro forma, unless of course you're out of training, you're on a career break, in which case, or maternity leave, paternity leave, in which case all you need to complete is a Form R. So you've met with your education supervisor. Your education supervisor has completed the education supervisor's trainer's report, which must have the clinical supervision report, the section completed, unless you have a separate CS, in which case that CS needs to complete a clinical supervisor's report. So most of the trainees have the same CS as the same person, but some of you don't. So it's important to make sure that where you don't have a separate CS, that section is completed. And some education supervisors forget to do that. So it's important for you to look at the form when your ES has finished with it, and just that's the time to sort of say, oh, you missed out this section, or you put the wrong info. And agree achievement of all the learning objectives if you're at the end of a level. And I will show something that explains that if I would share my Word document, which I'll try and do later. Okay, I've just got some useful websites and resources at the end before I show you one or two more documents. And I think Emma's going to really talk about the RCPCH resources. But this one here, the judging, there we go, judging achievement of learning outcomes to support ARCP progression, is an incredibly useful document. It's a document for the ARCP panel uses to assess e-portfolios, and it's a guide for trainees and trainers. So it's all clear about how to decide whether this trainee has given good evidence, insufficient evidence, or not, and whether they can actually progress. So please download that and use it. Now, I'm just going to see if I can find, yeah. So we use creep sheets. Can you see this form? Probably.
No, not yet, Dr. Peter.
Okay,
on our screen.
I think I need to share again. So, there we go. Share screen. Yeah. Okay. So we've drawn up creep sheets that help the ARCP panel when we are reviewing trainees. So we've got levels 1, 2, and 3, and I'm happy to share this. In fact, I should actually put it on the LSP website. So this is the creep sheet that we use to review trainees, and we go through basically all aspects of the e-portfolio. So they have meetings, the trainee have PDP goals identified, the ES report, the assessments and MSF, the mandatory assessments, and this is all based on the curriculum. And because it's level 1, some things are optional and some things are not. Well, clearly, even if you've done something that's optional, we want to take that into consideration because of all the evidence that you're presenting. And then we've got all the domains. Well, first of all, we talk about the mandatory courses. And then we've got all the domains. And I talked about whether the trainee has achieved the learning outcome, or whether it's in progress, and sometimes something, you can see evidence that the trainee is on his way or her way to achieving those learning outcomes, but they're not there yet. But by the time you come to the end of level 1, all of that needs to be achieved. It needs to be ticked as achieved, and your educational supervisor must do that. And then we make a decision whether the trainee is, if at the end of ST3, are they ready to progress? But, if they're not, how are they doing along their journey? Are they making good progress? Any exceptional achievements? And then the ARCP panel will come up with an outcome. And we also give formal feedback. If there's things that we've noted that are good, we say. If there are things that are of concern, we say. So for instance, we say your APLS and NLS are out of date, or we notice you haven't done any reflective entries over the last year, or we notice that your workplace-based assessments were all done in the last 2 weeks. Please make sure you spread them out. And then the ARCP panel will calculate your CCT date depending on the time that you have already spent in that level, and whether you're fast tracking or not, and whether you're less than full-time, etc. And then I have got this guide. This is on the it's on the LSP website, this document. So please do download it. So this is what I mean about achieved. So this is a trainee who's come to the end of their training and going for outcome 6. And so we need to see that all 11 learning outcomes are documented as achieved. And if they've got subspecialty outcomes, that would need to be done as well. What are the outcomes? Just very quickly before I take any questions. I think I've got them. So you know that we've got temporary COVID minimum evidence requirements. So please, again, just have a look at those. Those are the minimum requirements. So it doesn't not mean that this is all you have to provide, but this is the minimum that you have to provide to the ARCP panel. Okay. Here we go, outcomes. So when the ARCP panel have reviewed the totality of the trainee's e-portfolio, then they make a judgment whether the trainee gets an outcome 1 because there's satisfactory progress for their level of training, and what is considered an expected rate. And outcome 2, we do issue a lot of these where the development of some specific competencies are required. So say, for instance, there were no reflective entries at all, and very few workplace-based assessments. And we say, look, we need you to do that. Or the education supervisor has said something about communication being an issue. So we say, work on communication, perhaps go on a course, do some leader CBDs with your education supervisor. Outcome 3 is where the trainee is clearly not making progress. They've come to the end of a level, or they're clearly they're a significant way through a level, and really there's clear evidence that they're not going to be able to achieve those learning outcomes.
And I think your screen is frozen.
Is it?
Your screen is
sorry to
frozen.
I was just going to say, could you we can't see the outcomes on the screen at the moment.
I'm sorry. Okay. All right. Okay.
We can just see the
Can you see this?
This is feedback recorded on ARCP form is what we can see, but we can't see the outcome numbers at the moment.
Okay, I think I'll start again. Can you see that now?
Yes, this is the slides.
Yeah, it's
moving
now.
You can see the outcomes now. Here. Yeah.
Here we can see them. Thank you.
Okay, fine. Okay, so outcome 3, usually where there's some competency problems, but a lot of the time it's exams, is where trainees haven't made adequate progress with exams. And outcome 4s, which is heartbreaking, is when we unfortunately have to release a trainee from the training program where they've had additional training time but haven't been able to either pass exams or demonstrate the key capabilities that are required for their level of training. Outcome 5s, we hate them. We really, really hate them. Please don't get an outcome 5. An outcome 5 is usually where the trainee hasn't put the evidence that's required. Your ES hasn't completed the clinical supervisor's part of the form. You haven't put in your days out of training on your Form R, or in fact, there's no Form R. We can't calculate your CCT date because you didn't give us a breakdown of your post and whether you're 60%, 80%, etc. So we give you 2 weeks to get that completed and then have to reissue another outcome. So that's time wasting. It's like a yellow card, because the next time you get to your ARCP and you don't submit the right information, you get an outcome 2. And the postgraduate dean keeps a record of outcome 2, so you don't want those either. And outcome 6 is the one that really gladdens our heart, is where we say that our trainee has completed and gained all the required competencies for recommendation for CCT, and they can go out into the world and continue to be great pediatricians. So I think I'm going to stop there and answer questions, because I think I've done my 30 minutes, haven't I?
Thank you, Dr. Puto. That's a fantastic talk. Even sitting here myself as a consultant, learn from it. I think I echo what you say about the planning is so important early on in terms of, and I know Emma's going to give us a talk with Dara on the portfolio, but the importance of engaging in that portfolio early in your training and using it as a diary. I think a lot of the questions that have been asked so far have been answered by our soft landings team as going through, and also by Dr. Dyer, so I thank you for that. But if there's any more questions, Nadia's going to have a look at the chat and monitor it and put them to you, to Dr. Puto. So I'll hand over to Nadia.
Thank you very much, Dr. Puto. It was a really interesting, really useful talk. Thank you. Yes, as Bijan said, most of the questions have been answered. Thank you, Emma, and by the soft landing team, but we'll just give a few more minutes for any questions.
How to have a tidy e-portfolio, is that what's...
I think so.
Sabrina, is that your question? Yeah. I think just going through the various aspects. Emma would touch on that, but again, it's just thinking, what does this e-portfolio say about me? What does it represent me as? Not all of us are very techie savvy, and not all of us are. It's not intuitive to have an e-portfolio, to use e-portfolio to document your training and write things down. We're not very good, a lot of us, at writing things down. So I think actually getting direction from your peers, your education supervisor, about what you want to put in your e-portfolio. You don't put everything in. And I think a lot of the times the untidy e-portfolios I see is where everything has gone in, everything, every teaching session, every Thursday teaching session, every course they went to, every journal club, it then becomes so unwieldy, really, even though it will all be there. And sometimes when we're looking at e-portfolios, if we can't find what we're looking for, we have to scroll down. And when you're scrolling down 50 documents, you miss something. And then you miss that very important reflective entry that showed just how amazing, you were in ED and things were overrunning, and how you sorted things out.
I was just going to say, Dr. Puto, as well, not only for ARCP, but having just CCT about 1.5 years ago, I found it extremely useful using it as a diary for my consultant interviews, looking through the experiences that I'd had. Because sometimes you forget these things, and when you're very busy, and as Dr. Puto said, it's a long journey. When you come to write your consultant interviews and they're asking you for reflections and evidence, then you can go back to your e-portfolio and use that as a diary. So I echo exactly what you said about using it early on, and it can be used to that advantage as well.
You don't have to document all the teaching. You really don't. You want to document the stuff that has made. So, for instance, you go to the new NICE. I'm a neonatologist. I'm only going to talk about neonates, but the new NICE guidelines. You have a journal club about that. You ran it. You've now been tasked with changing the guidelines. That's a big thing, because early onset sepsis is a big aspect of what we do day to day. So that stuff can go in, but just every teaching session, it's not necessary. If you can link that to a learning outcome and what you learned and what it says about you on your training journey, then yes, it should go in. But if it really is just to log something, that's not what the e-portfolio is about. It's not about logging every training encounter. It's logging a training encounter that demonstrates progression or acquisition or demonstration of capabilities or competencies. You can decide to use it that way. The problem with using it that way rather than as a progression tool is that it becomes very unwieldy. Just, it's a long journey. If you're starting out at ST2, ST3, you've got up to ST6, and that e-portfolio is going to become really tough, really bulky. So in fact, we talked about restricting the number of key capabilities that you could link an encounter to, just so that, people didn't put lots of stuff in their e-portfolio.
There's a question, is Form R mandatory in all deaneries?
Absolutely, it's a GMC requirement. And I think on the presentation, I've put the Gold Guide. That's the other thing I want you guys to please, please, please download the Gold Guide. When I was a trainee in the year 000, it was actually a gold color, the document. That's why it's called the Gold Guide. And it was this thick, and I used to sort of scroll through it to look at, it's the Bible of your training. I mean, the way it works is that HEE, you belong to HEE, your HEE trainees, even though you are you're fanned out to various trusts, but HEE are the ones that are responsible for your training. But actually, ultimately, it's the GMC that is legally responsible and rubber stamps your training. So they have reviewed the curriculum and passed it and said it's good, it's fit for use. They're the ones that are going to say that trainee can be revalidated, that trainee can complete training. So the GMC Gold Guide is your training Bible. That, with the training guide from the ARCP and the progress curriculum documentation, should really be at your fingertips. You should be referring to those. So the Form R is mandatory for every trainee that's registered on a UK training program, every specialty.
Thank you, Dr. Puta. I think just one last question. Someone was asking, is it okay to use evidence from previous posts, or is it just from that training year that you're going to be assessed?
Well, you see the difference between the fact I've done this, I've done that. That's fine. You're just talking, and that's great to talk. But you want to do the walk, don't you? So if you've got all that evidence from a post elsewhere, how have you demonstrated that, such that someone can say, yes, Anne is very experienced, she does this and does that. You need to actually show, that's how you show your capability, show that you're capable. So it's not about what jobs you've done, it's the experience you've got from those jobs and that experience, that training experience, demonstrated in the post that you're in against the key capabilities for the learning outcomes that you are, against the learning outcomes for the key capabilities that you have to demonstrate. So you have to demonstrate it. Otherwise, it's just, we need to see the evidence of it.
Thank you, Dr. Pute. So I think what we'll do is we'll leave it there. Many thanks for coming and attending our session as an external speaker. It's been fantastic having you. We're going to have a 10-minute break now. During this break, as I mentioned earlier, the QRL code is going to be flashed up on the screen. And if people could use their smartphones to take a shot of that and to fill in the poll to give us guidance as the educational arm of the soft landings team into what other topics you would like to have in the future, we'd very much appreciate that, and it'll be for your benefit. So we'll aim to be back here at 7 p.m. Where we have a brilliant talk by Dr. Emma Dyer on the Kaizen e-portfolio, which Dr. Pute has touched upon during her talk.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pute. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Take care, everyone.
No. kurucusu Arsenal
So welcome back to the educational session on smashing your ARCP and ePortfolio. I wanted to apologise and say that to those 25 people who have joined us, we did have a bit of a technical hitch, and we were only initially allowed to admit 100 people to the session. But fear not, we are recording, and we will be posting this on the website when it's up and running. And if you do email the Soft Landings team, we will be able to provide you with a recording of the session and Dr. Pute's talk. But I do apologise about that. And also for the QRL code, if you weren't able to get that earlier, we'll try and put it up again at the end of the session. So moving forward, our second speaker, I'm delighted to introduce, is Dr. Emma Dyer. She is a paediatric registrar in Lewisham, and she is an expert on the ePortfolio because she is the RCPCH and ePortfolio curriculum trainee representative. So we're really lucky to have her here today. Her talk is entitled Untangling Kaizen. And again, it will be followed by another 10-minute session of questions. So if you do want to put questions up during the talk, and then the Soft Landings team can answer them, but if you want them to be directed to Dr. Dyer, please wait until the end, and then Nadia will be monitoring those questions. So over to you, Dr. Dyer, and thank you again for attending today. We appreciate it.
Hi, good evening, everyone. It's lovely to be with you. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited that there's so many people that want to spend their Wednesday evening chatting about Kaizen. So I'm going to try and do a bit of a whistle-stop tour through Kaizen and hopefully make you all Kaizen whizzes by the end of this. I'm just going to share my screen, hopefully. Let's see if that works. Can everyone see that?
Yes, we can.
Brilliant. Okay, so untangling Kaizen. So what we're going to do, if my slides move on, there we go. I'm going to do a bit of a run through very briefly as a bit of a background to ePortfolio, why we have it. Then we'll go quickly through navigating Kaizen. I want to spend most of the time on this bit, how to get around it and how to use all the features that are there. A couple of top tips, and then finally, and probably most importantly, what to do when it doesn't work or it goes wrong or you're not sure what to do with it, which happens a lot, but usually it's quite an easy fix. So first of all, now we've already kind of covered a bit of this with Dr. Pute earlier, but why do we have Kaizen? So if you're in a training program in the UK, whatever that training program may be, as you've said, you have to evidence that you're training and progressing through that program. The GMC mandates this and they oversee all the training programs. And as you've said, there is a curriculum and there is a curriculum for all training programs that we have to show that we're evidencing. It would be lovely if we could all go to work, do our job, and everyone say, yep, you're great, carry on. But unfortunately, we have to make sure that training is standardized and that everyone's meeting the same standards and we're producing good quality doctors. So that is why we have to do ePortfolio. And the best way we have at the moment of evidencing that training and that we're meeting those curriculum standards is by recording our development and learning on our ePortfolios. So that is why we have to spend time working out how to use Kaizen. So we've already talked about the progress curriculum. Here's what it looks like. So you can get this on the RCPCH website, and I'm going to put some links up at the end for some resources. This is the progress curriculum, which came in 2018. And trust me, as someone who used the old curriculum, it is a million times better. There are 3 levels at the moment. So level 1, which is ST1 to 3, level 2, ST4 to 5, and then level 3, ST6 to 8. And level 3 includes subspecialty training. So all level 3 trainees will have 2 curriculum. One will be the general curriculum that everyone has to do, and the second one will be their specialty. Now, for a lot of people, this will be general pediatrics, and then there'll be some people who go down the grid route and subspecialize in other things like could be pediatric emergency medicine or renal medicine or respiratory medicine. So they'll have their subspecialty curriculum as well. So we're going to now go to navigating and using Kaizen. So I'm going to just stop sharing my screen for a second and then hopefully share this. So hopefully now you can see Kaizen. Now this might be familiar. I'm hoping it will be familiar to quite a few of you, but this is what you see when you log into Kaizen. This is your dashboard. So I'm just going to run you through what you first see on your dashboard because there's some quite useful things on here, but lots of people tend to just kind of skip straight past it. So up here you can see level 1 pediatric trainee. This will be your name when you log in. At the moment I've got a test trainee, so that's why it says that. a good thing to know when you look at your dashboard, it's quite busy. If you don't like this, you can actually minimize anything you want to, and then expand it again if you want, just to get rid of it. The college puts up various bits and pieces here. So this is kind of where it says supervision reports and examples of how to evidence the progress curriculum. They put up tips and tricks and some useful guidance. So it's worth having a little look. What you can see here that says level 1 learning outcomes. Now these are your curriculum goals, and this will be specific to your level. So this is a level 1 trainee. So here you can see the 11 domains, and these are for the level 1 learning outcomes. Down this side, what you can see, it either says achieved or there's a number. Now, when there's a number, this number is how many pieces of evidence you've linked to the key capabilities within that domain. Once your educational supervisor feels that you've got enough evidence to meet all the learning outcomes in that domain, they are then able to mark it off as achieved. So that's why you can see achieved here. Now, what you want by the end of level 1, which is the end of ST3, you want all of these to be achieved so that you can say, I've met the curriculum, I can move on to the next level. And the ARCP panel will see that as well. So hopefully when you log into your dashboard, this gives you a quick overview. You can immediately see where your gaps are. This trainee, he's only got one thing linked to QI, only one thing linked to research. So potentially that's where they want to be focusing and getting a few more bits of evidence for these. If you scroll down, you've got your inbox. This is where the training services team at the college pop anything that you might need to know. So if they've got updates or things have changed or they've got some message that you might need to know about, they put it in here. So it's worth having a quick look at your inbox as well. If we go down a bit further, you come to the profile. So this is quite important. This has all your details on. So you'll see your name here, and you should also see your current post. It should say your training level, and it should say your educational and clinical supervisor. Now, if these details aren't correct, then you might have some trouble with Kaizen later on. So it's important that this is right. I'm going to show you how to make sure this is right in a bit, but that's where you'll see it. We then have a couple of reports. So this report here, this is for all your mandatory certificates and training. So that's NLS and APLS, and sometimes it'll be your level 3 child protection certificate as well. So you'll be able to quickly glance and see when you last did them, when they're valid until, and so have a quick idea of when you need to start booking on those courses again. Then at the bottom, there's 2 other reports. We have an assessment summary here and a skills and development log summary here, or as I like to call it, the Kaizen donut. So it's important to note that both of these reports will reset every August. Some people get a bit stressed when this happens because it looks like they've just, all your assessments have disappeared. That's not what's happened. They'll still be there, but every August these become blank, and then it will fill in for from that year until next August. So this trainee, you can see, has got 2 case-based discussions in their assessments. When they start filling in more assessments, like if they do a KEX or a DOPS, that will come up in a separate bar next to it. So you'll gradually see how many assessments you've got and of which types. In the skills and development log, similar idea, except it displays it like a pie chart. So this trainee has got 1 development log, and it's a clinic development log. As they start filling more, you'll get different sections of the pie chart. So at a quick glance, you can see in the last kind of year or since last August, what you've been doing. So that's the dashboard. Then we can go to the timeline. So we have options here to go to the whole timeline, or you can break it up and just look at your assessments or just look at your supervision reports. So I'm just going to go to assessments just to show you. So you can see on the assessments timeline, all the assessments this trainee has done. A few things to note: anything that's brown on the side, this means that it hasn't yet been completed. So either you need to fill something in, or usually it's the person you've sent the form to hasn't filled in their bit yet. Anything green is completed. And once it's green and completed, that means that your supervisor will be able to see it when they log on to your portfolio. Okay, so that's the timeline. Now from here, you can create a new event by pressing the green create new button here. You can also do that anytime by pressing this little plus button here. And that will take you to this menu. Now this seems quite overwhelming when you first look at it. There's a lot of different options, but it's actually quite simple. We'll just run through a few of the important bits and break it down. The first thing I want to draw your attention to is the supervision and PDP section. Now we've talked a bit about some of these already today, but the most important bit here is adding your educational or clinical supervisors. When you click into this form, Steve at Training Services has put this in the biggest text he possibly could because this is a problem that happens a lot. So when you start a new job and you get a new educational and or clinical supervisor, you must add them to your portfolio. If you don't do this, they won't be able to access your portfolio and then they can't fill in your educational supervisor forms, which obviously you have to have for ARCP. The most important thing on this form is this bit, the date. So the date occurred on is the start date of the placement, and then the end date you might think would be the end date of the placement. But what you should always do is make sure that you put the end date as a few months after your placement will end. And the reason for this is that once you get to the end date, your supervisor will no longer be able to access your portfolio. And if you haven't had your sign-off meeting, perhaps you've both been busy and you end up needing to do it a couple of weeks after you finish the job, they won't be able to access your portfolio, which creates all sorts of problems. So put the date at the start and then the end date, put a few months after you finish the job. And then when you get to the bottom, you can pop in the educational and or your clinical supervisor there. And then once you've done that, it will appear on your dashboard like we talked about at the start. Right, now I'm going to go back and it will pop up with this error message, but don't worry about that. Okay, then the rest of the supervision, yours will look a bit different because we've slimmed this down a little bit. So you'll have an option for a supervisor meeting. And once you click into that, you'll then be able to select the type of supervisor meeting you want to do. So that's the supervision bit. In the same vein, I just want to go down to here, training posts and absences. Now, the most important bit here is this button, training post. So once you click into here, similar idea, you can put in your training post. This one is not so important about the end date. You can actually put the end date of the post here. And then there'll be options to find your hospital, so your trust, and then you select your hospital and your training grade as well at the bottom. Now, you can also put in if you're having time out of program, if you're on parental leave, and you can put it in here. Once you've done that, again, that will then drag through to your dashboard, so you'll be able to see your current placement on your profile on your dashboard. Now, the reason that that is really important as well, it's not just so everything's kind of making sense on your portfolio, but when you get to the end of your training and you CCT, what no one tells you is you have to provide a load of paperwork to the GMC, and that includes a list of all the placements you've done, all the jobs you've done, whether you were full-time or less than full-time, what dates they were from and to. So if you keep this up to date on your portfolio, that becomes a lot easier because you've already got a record of it. So I want to move on to assessments up at the top. Now, this is probably some of the main things you'll end up doing. This is how you create the assessments that you send to your seniors to get them to fill in. Now, a lot of these you've probably used before, some of them you may not have done. So things like the acute care assessment tool or the leader CBD. We'll talk a bit about when you need to do these, but there's a really good page on the RCPCH website that tells you exactly what these are and what kind of a good scenarios to use them in. I'd love to go through all of them with you now, but we will run out of time if I do that. So I just want to talk a little bit about the assessments, and we'll use the CBD to start with for that. So a CBD, case-based discussion, you come across a case at work that's interesting, you have a discussion about it with your senior, and you reflect on what you've learned. And you can fill that all in here. The thing I want to focus on is when you scroll down, and this is the same on all the forms, you get to the progress curriculum. So as we spoke about, this is the important bit. This is what you're evidencing that you have achieved. So what I want to talk about is tagging. So when you do an assessment or a reflection or anything on your portfolio, you can tag it to the curriculum, and that's how you evidence that you're meeting the curriculum. Now, as you can see here, we have all 11 domains, and because this is a level 1 trainee, when we click on them, we'll get the level 1 learning outcomes for each domain. When you go into each learning outcome, you then get the key capabilities. So there are 3 key capabilities for this learning outcome. If you take one thing away from this talk, this is the thing. The really important thing when you're tagging is that you tag to key capabilities. As you can see, you physically can tag to the domain or to the learning outcome. We can't, unfortunately, remove that box. We've tried. But what you need to do is tag to the key capabilities. Only things tagged to key capabilities will pull through to those curriculum goals that we looked at on the dashboard. If you tag to the domain or the learning outcome and not key capabilities, that won't pull through. The other thing that's important is that the Royal College really want you to only tag to key capabilities really within one domain, and probably only one, maybe two key capabilities for any one assessment or reflection. If you are going to tag to more than one domain, you need to justify that on this form here. And the reason for that is not the college trying to be difficult, but it is so that when you're doing an assessment or a reflection, you really focus your learning and really reflect on what it is that you have learned from that case or from that mini KEX or that reflection. So that's a little bit about tagging. Just to go back to the assessments, the other one that I know we were talking about in the previous talk are the MSFs. So this is the multi-source feedback. You have to do one of these per training year. And when you go into it, you'll see it's a long form. You first do your own trainee self-assessment. So you fill all these in, you talk about your strengths, your weaknesses, and where you think you are with all these different things. And then when you get to the bottom, which is quite a way down, here, you then can start filling in this form to send it to other people. And on Kaizen, when you start typing in a name, it auto-populates, hopefully, yeah, there we go. And you can select the person that you want to send it to. And you can put quite a few names in here. You need at least 7 to be able to close your MSF. And then you send it off, and hopefully those people fill it in. If I just go back to the timeline, because I just want to show you one thing that sometimes trips people up. Let's go to that bit of the timeline. Once you've created your MSF, if you decide later on that you want to send it to other people, if you go back into it from your timeline, there is an option here to add more people. So you can still send it to other people once you've sent it off, that's fine. And you can also remind people, and you can do this for any assessments that someone else is filling in by pressing the remind button if they haven't completed it yet. So just going back to the options of all the different things you can create, I just want to go down to the development logs. So these are great because these are ways you can record learning that you've had, and you don't need other people to fill them in. You can just fill them in yourself. As you can see, there's a lot of different options. And I'd, again, love to go through all of them with you, but we just don't have time for that today. But most of them are pretty self-explanatory. You can put in courses, if you've done some teaching, if you've presented at a conference, or you've had a poster, if you've done a QI project, or you've been involved in a management role, if you've sat in on clinics or done clinics yourself. This is all the place that you can pop that in. You can talk about what you've learned from it, and you can link it to the curriculum. The other thing that you can do as well, which is worth mentioning, so say you've gone on a course and you want to put in here what you've learned, which is great. At the bottom, right at the bottom, there is a button here that says attach files, and if you click on that, then you'll be able to add documents. So you can upload your certificate from the course or something like that, just to add to that evidence, and that's worth noting as well. The important thing to say, because obviously there is a development log here that says certified course, but there is a caveat to that. So your mandatory courses, which are NLS, APLS, and your level 3 safeguarding, you must not put them in the development log. And this is really, really important. They have to go in this separate bit here, skills logs and certificates. So there is, as you can see, a separate option for child protection certification. This is for your level 3 safeguarding training. And there is a separate option for life support certification. And this is for your NLS and your APLS. If you don't put these things here, they don't pull through on your educational supervisor report, and they're not in the right place. So the ARCP panel may not see them, and it may look like you haven't done the courses when you actually have. So just make sure that you put those 3 mandatory courses in their specific place. So here you can see this is the life support certification. You can put in when you did it, and then there's an option here to put in when it expires. So it's usually 4 years. So you put your when you need to revalidate basically in here. And then again, there's the option to attach files, and you can upload your certificate there. So just be careful and make sure that you put the mandatory courses in their correct options on ePortfolio to make sure it all pulls through properly. The other thing that's here is the skills log. So obviously in the assessments up at the top, you've got your DOPS, directly observed procedural skills. And as we know, if I just click on it, there are, for level 1 training, 5 mandatory DOPS. So you have to show that you can do all of these independently by the end of your level 1 training. And for that, you'll fill in a DOPS where someone will observe you and then say, yeah, they can do that. If, however, you've done other procedures or you're doing them independently and no one's watching you, but you want to show that you're keeping up your skills and have a record for your own kind of records as well of what you've been doing, then the skills log, that's where that comes in. So here you can pop in the date, you can put in the type of procedure, and you can choose from lots of options. And when you do that, if you scroll down, you'll get lots of different options related to what you've chosen, but there's always an option for other as well. So if it's something that's not on there, you can record that. And then you can put here the level of supervision. So if you've performed it independently, or even if you've taught and supervised someone else doing it, you can pop it in here. And it's a nice way of evidencing that you're keeping up your skills logs. Right, the other things I just wanted to show you, if we look along the top, is the goals option. So when you click on goals, there's a few different options here. We're going to look at the PDPs. So when you have your start of placement induction meeting with your supervisor, you will come to them with your PDP, your personal development plan. And it's a good idea to have a think about this before your meeting. These are things that you want to achieve during your placement. And then in your meeting, your supervisor will make these into goals, which will go onto your portfolio. So you can see this trainee, if we look at the bottom one, that one of their goals they've made with their educational supervisor is meeting the ability to perform cannulation independently. So you can go into that goal and you can then go to link event. So you can link evidence to show that you've met this goal that you wanted to achieve. So if you go to select existing event, and then if you search for, say, DOPS, because you want to show that you're cannulating, and scroll down, there is a lovely DOPS here for peripheral venous cannulation, and you can just click on link this event. That then links to your goal. You can say I'm done linking, so that when you go into your goals, you've got at the bottom one event here links to your goal. Once you're happy that you've got enough evidence to demonstrate that you've achieved this goal, then you can actually change this and say it's achieved, mark this goal. So then when your supervisor or the ARCP panel looks at your goals, they'll be able to see that you've evidenced that you've achieved them and that you've marked them as achieved as well. So those are your personal goals that you make for your placement. The other type of goals we're going to look at are the curriculum goals. So these will appear on your portfolio automatically, be put on there by the college, and they'll be relevant to your level of training. So for example, on the level 1 learning outcomes here, you can see all the domains as on the dashboard and whether they've been achieved or not, and how many things have been linked to them. Only your educational supervisor can mark these goals as achieved. You can't do that, but you can also go into them in the same way and link things to them. Now, you shouldn't really need to do this because anything that you create, like an assessment or a reflection, if you tag it to the curriculum with the key capabilities, that automatically will pull through to your curriculum goals. So they should all fill up as you're doing your assessments. The final thing I just want to show you here are the reports. This is another really useful way to review your progress against the curriculum. You go to the RCPTH progress curriculum on reports. What that does, sometimes it takes a while to load, but it will pull up here. Here you are. It pulls up all of the curriculum outcomes here. And again, you can drop down and say you want to see what you've got tagged to domain 1. Then you just select that. And on the right-hand side, everything that you've got tagged to that domain will come up. And you can even go more specific and say, right, what have I got tagged to this key capability? And this CVD comes up, and that's the thing that you've tagged to that key capability. So this is a nice way that you can quickly just review your progress and see where your gaps are. If you want to just have a quick glance, you can see that at the end you've got how many tags you've got for each domain. So you can have a scan down and say, oh look, I've only got 2 for quality improvement, but I've got 16 for professional values and behaviours. So maybe I need to focus a bit more on, you know, trying to bulk up my quality improvement domain. So that is most of the things I wanted to show you. The last bit is I'll just look at documents so you can see this. So anything you upload, when I was showing you those buttons where it says upload document and you upload a certificate or something, that will all automatically just come in here. But it just comes, it just puts everything all in a big line basically. You can order this if you want. You can create folders up here. So you could have a folder that says certificate, and then you can put all of your certificates in that folder so that it's easy for you to find them later on. This is also where you can create the folder for each ARCP, where you're going to put in all those forms that Dr. Pute was talking about earlier. And you can also directly upload documents here as well, if you don't want to do it via your assessments that you're creating or your development logs. So that is the whiz through of Kaizen. Now, what I want to do is just go back to my slides. So there we go. Hopefully we're back on slides. So my top tips. We've kind of already talked about these a little bit in the previous talk, but the #1 top tip is do not leave all of this till a week before your ARCP. It's very stressful. You don't want that stress. The idea is much better to do a little and often on your e-portfolio. So every week or two, just try and have 15, 20 minutes where you sit down and just get a few bits done on your portfolio. It's really useful to prepare, to know what assessments you need. So this grid is very important. This is the assessment grid, and it's on the RCPCH website. Currently, it's slightly adapted for COVID requirements, but at some point, it'll probably go back to what it was before. So you can see on this grid, you've got each level of training, each training year, and then underneath it says what you need for each level. So look at this and know this. Look at this at the start of the year and know what you need to get done. So you can see that every year you have to do a safeguarding CBD, every year you have to do an MSF. There's no minimum requirement for KEXs and CBDs, and the idea is it's quality, not quantity, but you do need some of these, and you do need some reflections. You have to do a handover assessment tool, at least one in the first 3 years. So you just have a look at this and know what you need to get done, because that helps you to prepare. Focus and see where your gaps are. So as I showed you before, how to review the curriculum and see where you've got not many bits of evidence. You might have got loads for one thing, but hardly any for anything else. So then you can say, right, well, when I'm in work next time, I'm going to focus on getting something that I can put in this domain where I don't have much tagged at the moment. And I find it really helpful to kind of set yourself goals, mini goals for when you're at work. So say you've got a run of night shifts coming up and you haven't got that mandatory DOPS for cannulation yet, then you can be like, right, in this run of night shifts, I'm going to get the reg to come with me, observe me doing a cannula and get that DOPS signed off. Or maybe you are going to do the handover when you're on night and say, okay, I'm going to speak to the consultant before handover on Tuesday morning after my night, and I'm going to ask them if they can do a hat for me. So just have that in mind kind of before you're going in, and you're much more likely to then get those things done. The last tip says, remember, I find this really helpful actually. I have a list on my phone. So often you might be in A&E and you see like a really interesting case that you're like, oh, I want to reflect on that. Or you've done a lumbar puncture and you think, oh, I need to put that on my skills log. But then the day goes on, there's loads of patients to see and you just kind of forget about it. So I have a list on my phone that I quickly write down, lumbar puncture on this day in a 6-month-old or something. And then when I sit down to look at Kaizen, I can go back to that list and remember to, I'll just pop that onto my skills log. So I find that quite helpful. So what do you do when it goes wrong or you're not sure or it's not working? So it depends what the problem is, but there's a few options. And the good thing is it's usually an easy fix. So if it's a technical thing that's not working, so things like you can't see the right curriculum, your training level is wrong and you can't change it, you're getting error messages popping up or things are just disappearing, then email training services. This is their email address. They're a really lovely team, and they genuinely care about your training and want you to do well, and they want your portfolio to work for you. So if it's not working, email them, and they often can just pop into your portfolio and fix it really quickly. If you're not getting anywhere with that, or there's other issues like you want to put something on your portfolio, you're not really sure where it should go, or you're not really sure which curriculum you should be using or anything like that, you can always contact me. That's my email address, and that's my Twitter handle. I'm always very happy to help. I'm always very happy to run through portfolio stuff. Sometimes I can fix the problem, which is great. It saves you stress and saves you having to wait for the college to come back to you. And if I can't, and if you're not getting anywhere with training services, I can chase it up for you as well. The other two websites I've just popped up here are very useful. So both of them on the RCPCH website. The first one is Kaizen guidance, and when you go on there, there's loads of information about how to use Kaizen, including some recent training videos which I made, which show in real time things like filling in educational supervisor reports, filling in MSFs, and it shows Kaizen and clicking through all the things you need to click through. So if you're not sure how to do something, that's a really good first place to check. And then the other one is the assessment guide on the college website. Now this runs through every assessment, so it kind of tells you what is a HAT, what is a leader CBD, what is an ACAT, and what situations can you use those in. So that's another really good place to go, and that's where you'll also find the assessment grid I showed you of what you need to get in each year. So definitely check out those places, and anything you're not sure about, you're always free to get in touch with me. So that is it. Kaizen, just top kind of pub quiz knowledge, is actually a Japanese word that means change good, or some people interpret it as meaning continuous improvement. So hopefully that's what we're showing we're doing through our portfolios. And that's it. So please, any questions, fire away. I'll do my best.
Thank you, Emma. That was fantastic. I think the real-time part of that presentation was extremely useful. So thank you for including that as well. I'll hand over to Nadia, and I'll let her have a look at the questions and read off from the chat.
Thank you very much, Emma. That was really useful, and it's really nice to meet you. Hopefully we'll meet you in person sometime.
I hope so.
Thank you. It's, yeah, Kaizen, I'm only after 4 years, I'm only starting to understand it. When I came first, it was just a complete mystery. But yes, so the questions are, any possibility to change the expiry date of a course? The expiry date wasn't the right one initially. I'm not sure.
Oh, I'm not 100% sure, but on any form, if you find it on your timeline and click onto it, when you go into it, there's usually a button that says edit. And if you click on the edit button, you may be able to change the end date. If you can't through doing that, then training services might be able to change it for you. So it's worth dropping them an email. But on all forms, there's normally an edit button when you go into them once they're completed, and you can sometimes change things on there. Or you could just delete it and then do it again. So you can delete anything on your timeline. So if it's wrong and you can't edit it, then you can just delete the whole thing and re-enter it with the correct date on.
Thank you, Emma. Another question, which is quite actually relevant, is in regards to spin competencies. Do we link level 3 general peds and spin separately?
So yes, you will. So for level 3 trainees, as I said, you have at least 2 curriculum. So you'll have there's a generic curriculum that everybody does no matter what. So you'll have to do that one. If you're doing spin, then usually you're a general peds trainee in level 3. So you'll have your general peds subspecialty curriculum, and then you have your spin competencies on top of that. So you will have to meet all of those competencies, just to bear that in mind. For level 3, the generic curriculum is not too onerous. There's not too many things on there, and it's not, you've got a couple of years to meet all of the requirements, so it should be doable. But yes, you will have to meet all of the separate ones.
Another question is, if I'm doing PEM training, only working in ED, and won't do an umbilical catheter, what happens is if I cannot fill it? I think this is like a clinical fellow in PEM, not like a PEM grid person. Yeah. Right.
So because I think umbilical catheter, yeah, it's only a level it's a mandatory for level 1, but I guess if you're doing level 1 competencies and you're not doing any jobs where you'll be in neonates, then that will be tricky to get unless you've got like a baby resus in A&E. If it was something you really wanted to get, then what I've had people do before is go up and find someone on NICU and say, look, I really want to do this. Can you like text me? Here's my number. If you get any babies coming in that need umbilical lines, and I can come and have a go. And you know, normally people are happy to help out. Everyone understands that everyone's got to get these done, and we have done things like that before. The other thing is if you've done APLS, then you do umbilical catheterization in APLS. And sometimes I've had trainees ask the instructor in APLS if they could, I know it's not a real patient, but you can still get a DOPS for doing it in APLS, and that's at least something then.
That's interesting, actually. I didn't realize you could do that. Can I link events to my PDP done prior to starting training?
Yeah, probably yes. I guess the probably official answer is that your PDP is for that training job. So your personal development plan, you make one for each job. So it should be things you want to achieve in that job. So you probably don't really need to be linking things you've done previously. You could put them on. You can put anything on at any time. It's your portfolio, and you technically could link them, but realistically, the PDP should be your personal development plan for that job. So you should be linking things from that job, really.
I think do we have time, Bijan? 1 or 2 more questions? Is there any
one or two more questions will be fine.
Yeah. Is there any easy way of checking that all key capabilities are done? Like will they show kind of?
Yeah. So there's a couple of ways. On the dashboard, you'll see your kind of outcomes, your curriculum goals. That doesn't show you the key capabilities on the dashboard, but if you click on each individual one and go into it, so if you click on domain 1, then it will come up with the key capabilities for domain 1, and you'll be able to see then how many things you have tagged to each key capability. The other way is to go into the reports, into the progress curriculum on reports, and again, then you should be able to view the whole curriculum, and if you drop down each domain to the key capabilities, you'll see how many things you have tagged to each one.
And another question, I'm not sure if this is relevant, but it's, could we attach an APLS done in another country?
Yes. I mean, APLS, if it's an APLS course, is valid anywhere. It's valid for 4 years. So as long as you have it and you've got a certificate and it's within date, then absolutely fine. You just need to put in when it kind of expires so that we know and you know when you need to be redoing it. But yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Well, what we'll do, we'll stop there. Thank you so much, Emma.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
We're
going to move on to the next section now. And this is going to be a section of the day where we're going to speak with 3 of our soft landing team members. They are going to give us a reflection of their experiences with the ARCP and Kaizen. We have Lakshya Ghosh, who is a ST4 trainee at the Princess Royal University Hospital in South London, Dr. Megha Jagger, who is an ST5 trainee in Wales and also a Dragon Bites host, and we're also joined by Dr. Satyam, who's an ST8 trainee in Newcastle on a cardiology spin. I think what we'll do is we'll go in that order, if that's okay. So Lakshya, if you can go first, and Dr. Jagger, if you can go second, and then Dr. Satyam, if you're able to go third, and then that will be at the we'll have our closing remarks at the end. So I'll move over to you, Lakshya, if that's possible.
Thank you, Bijan. I'll just start by sharing my screen. Hi, yes, so I'm Lakshya. I'm one of the pediatric trainees in London and started at ST4 in March. And before this, I was doing 3 years of fellow jobs in the UK. So I'm just going to quickly reflect and share some of my top tips of what the PE portfolio meant to me when I first came to the UK, when I was on my fellow jobs, and how I worked my way around it to use it to the best of my abilities during my training. So of course, this is what I think we all have been told from day one of being a doctor. If it's not there, you haven't done it, and mostly in the context of documentation in the medical notes, but it is kind of true for your e-portfolio as well, especially in the UK. And it is partly true, whether we like it or not. And one of the main reasons is if we are not in training, we still have to go through our appraisal and revalidation as per the GMC guidance. And I think ePortfolio is the best way to make sure you can show GMC that you're up to date with your capabilities, and that will help you in the long run as well. So one of my first top tip is start early. So when you come to the UK, you have got a checklist of things. You have to get your bank account, you have to sort your accommodation, you have to find your feet in the new job, but this is something you have to think at the same time as well. There were some questions on the chat about whether we need to have access to Kaizen if we are not in training. My personal opinion, and this was what I was advised on my first job in Birmingham Children's, was yes, because this is a e-portfolio that's designed for pediatric competencies. All pediatricians are familiar, your consultants, your colleagues, and it will be really easy to actually put evidence into your e-portfolio if you have access to Kaizen. And for this, if you have your MRCPCH completed, then you will be a member of RCPCH, you might have access, but if not, then you can be an associate member. And now we have a discounted associate membership fees for the RCPCH as well. And then you need to email the training services team to get your training access, and then you will be able to access the e-portfolio. I think that's the best thing that I would advise to others. But just be mindful, your trust will have a different appraisal system. So if you're not in training, your appraisal needs to go into the trust appraisal system. And SARD is the one that's commonly used in most of the London trusts, and outside London they might have their own. One of the other is Equinity, which I used in Stoke-on-Trent. The good thing about having Kaizen and the other one is you can actually document all evidence on Kaizen, and then, as I'm assured, when you go to the report section, you can get PDF of all your evidence, and you can just upload this PDF on SARD or whichever appraisal system your trust is using. And sometimes your appraiser might not be a pediatrician, so he or she might not be familiar to Kaizen. So in that case, that would be helpful to have all that evidence on SARD. So my second top tip would be keeping a log. So this is exactly what had happened to me. So I applied for my training post last year. It was a COVID adapted application process. And I had to give a lot of, I was coded on some of the evidence I had to provide. And one of them was clinical skills. I had all my mandatory docs signed off. And then I was expecting a 4 out of 4 score. And this was what the feedback was. It said there is no recent clinical skills log attached to show evidence to be awarded a score of 4. And that was partly because I know Emma from 2019. I had worked with her, but I never had the opportunity to look at her presentation. So I was not quite sure about what to do with the skills log. So once your mandatory docs are signed off, make sure you are updating your skills log as you go along. It's not that you have to update every single cannula you do, but sometimes maybe you could cannulate a baby which a consultant failed to cannulate, or maybe it was in a resus situation. So you can reflect on that. And your skills log, I was told the Kaizen donut, as Emma mentioned, should be looking like this. It should be multicolored. And these are all your developmental logs that you are recording. This is not really my tip. So never leave that till tomorrow, which you can do today. And again, something which we have been told from, I don't know, since ages. If you get time, like for today, if you get time today for 10, 15 minutes, just log today's session in your CPD diary entry. And otherwise, Naomi, one of the other soft landing members, she advised that like we all have a me time, we should have e-portfolio time or Kaizen time. My other tip would be face-to-face. Of course, the lockdown rules have relaxed now, so we can go face-to-face, but instead of the pubs, restaurants, which we should be going anyway, let's use it for e-portfolio and Kaizen. So what I found really helpful is sitting down with the consultant or with the senior trainee, whoever signing me off, and trying to get this filled in the same device. Number one, it does not get buried under their spam email or the junk email box. And I have found these opportunities really helpful, and especially coming from abroad, where it's a bit hierarchical and you're not really quite familiar with sitting down with the consultant. I found these meetings really helpful because I thought the feedback was more personal and interaction was more effective in terms of getting the learning outcome, and the consultant gets to know you and you get to know the consultant or the senior trainee and how things work. So the conversation extends slightly beyond the just documenting evidence and learning outcome. So take this opportunity if you have time. And this is, again, ePortfolio gives you a really good opportunity to reflect. And this is a skill that we need to develop when we are working in this country. And of course, as consultants, I've seen consultants doing this quite often as well. So the ePortfolio is the best place to start doing it because nobody's judging you at that time. If English is not your first language, this is the best place to start writing summaries or brief clinical summaries, anonymizing patient details. And these are things you can just read and have someone to read it for you, and you can edit. And this way you learn, and you learn to reflect as well using one of the reflective cycles that you're familiar with. And this would be my best tip. I have seen that most of the time I bond really well with all the trainees and everybody in the unit, and that is mostly over ePortfolio. So this, you have to remember, this is not just for you, this is for your colleagues as well. So if someone invites you to fill in their MSF, or if you're in a more senior position, if your juniors ask you to sign you off, yes, sit down with them, make sure you support them into not just your ePortfolio, but doing their ePortfolio as well. And you will definitely get something in return. So all the MSFs I sign for, I just send them an MSF just immediately in the next following week. And it's quite obvious that all pediatricians bond over Kaizen because we are having more than 100 trainees and fellows logging in for this session. So that would be my top tips, and I will stop sharing and I'll hand over to Megha, who's going to talk about her experiences with the ARCPs and Kaizen. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Megha. I'm going to share my screen with you all. I am currently an ST5 trainee in working in South Wales, but I have been a West Midlands trainee before I moved to Wales for my first ST1 to 3 part of the training. Unfortunately, Satyam is not with us today because he's working and he has some on-call issues, so he cannot join us today. So I will be taking over his part of the experience as well as my part of the experience as well. Nilakshi has very beautifully covered most of the things that I wanted to talk about anyways, but I will start with my personal experience. So when I first started, as a clinical fellow. I worked in Wales for 2 years and then joined training. I really wanted to do pediatrics, was very enthusiastic about it. As Nilakshi said, I was also recommended that I should have Kaizen even before I started my training. And that is why I joined Kaizen before I joined training. After 2 years of having used Kaizen and being a clinical fellow, when I joined training, I found Kaizen easy to use because I was already acquainted to it and I had used it before. And also, more importantly, many of my competencies were already signed off on Kaizen. And that is why I also stepped up early on. So I joined at ST1 level, but I stepped up after my ST2, rather than doing a whole year of ST3, I stepped up to ST4 because I had done most of my competencies during my clinical fellow years. So it can really help you if you want to become a pediatrician in this country and you're aiming to join the training in the long term, then starting early as a clinical fellow, join Kaizen, that will really help you. So I'm going to talk about a laid back deanery versus a strict deanery. So Satyam has come from laid back deanery where it was very easy. You had to just do the minimum requirements as guided by the RCPCH, and you would get the level outcome 1 in your ARCP. From where I came from in West Midlands, don't say that to my supervisors, but it was a strict deanery. When I first started, it was really, really strict, and they had special things. For example, the MSFs, RCPCH advises that MSF should be done once a year, but my deanery suggested that we should do MSF every 6 months. So in every post, so that we gain evidence from our colleagues how we are performing. And there were other criteria as well. So if your deanery has a checklist, go through it early on. Make sure you're ticking the boxes throughout your post rather than at the end of the post, because otherwise it will be tricky and you'll be chasing. Everyone chases the supervisors and the consultants at the end, the last 1 month before the RCP, everyone is chasing them and they have their inbox full of MSFs requests and CBD requests. So I will really suggest that you start early so that your boxes are ticked. So that's one thing. Wales is a very laid-back deanery as well, and I'm quite enjoying it here. But having come from a strict deanery, I am finding it really easy to acquaint with. Now, planning ahead for end of level 1 ARCP, the end of level 1, which means the ST3, end of ST3 ARCP, and then end of level 2, which means the end of ST5 ARCP, are the important ARCPs. And you really have to plan ahead, as Emma had suggested before, that you should start ticking all the curriculum items for level 1 training at the start, so that you are not missing out on a few bits at the end of level 1. For example, research is quite a tricky one. Governance is can be quite a tricky one to get through. And if you haven't got anything in your research at the end of level 1, which is quite possible, most of you are not doing research during your level 1 training. If you're not an academic training, if you're not an academic trainee, do your GCP course, and that will give you a point. And that will also be beneficial if your hospital, wherever you are working, if that hospital is doing a research, then you can take part in that research. If you have got your GCP, you can consent patients, you can consent their parents, and you can be a very good asset to the team. And GCP only takes about a couple of hours to do at home. So if you are still running out of the research tick box, then you can just do GCP course before your upcoming ARCP. And it is free online. Just Google it and you'll find it. So what does the ARCP panel do? I was quite, when it was my first ARCP, I wanted to go and see how it works. You don't necessarily have to go and see and sit with the panel. With COVID, it has become difficult anyways. They are not doing face-to-face ARCPs anymore with the COVID at most places. But when I first did my ARCP, it was a face-to-face interview, and they said that you don't have to come if your ARCP outcome is 1, but if your outcome is other than 1, you have to come. And if your outcome is 1, you are invited, you can come if you wanted to, but you do not have to. But I did go. My outcome was 1, but I did go because I wanted to see how it all worked. And I saw a few consultants, about 6 consultants sitting at a round table, and I was sitting at one corner of the table, and they gave me a very good positive feedback, which really boosted me and made me enthusiastic to work even more and do more Kaizen for the next year. So I quite enjoyed it. But afterwards, I found out that most of the things that they had written about, the good things they had written in my RCP form, had come from my education supervisor report and my clinical supervisor report. So they do read your portfolio. Most of the things that they read, if they have 60 portfolios to go through, they will definitely read your ES report, so your education supervisor report, sometimes your clinical supervisor report as well. They will be reading your MSFs because these are the things that give them the ideas how you are performing. And also they read some of your reflections to see how good are you at writing reflections. Sometimes when you're sitting with your educational supervisor for your educational supervisor report, which might be coming out soon, when you sit with them and they are running out of words, you can suggest them words to say about you, because they will be asking you, is there anything that I have forgotten? Is there anything that I have missed? Before you go in for your educational supervisors meeting at the end of session or the end of your post, have a written down points, point system in the 4 domains, which means academic domain, clinical domain, skills domain, research domain, or governance domain, and have the points, what you have done in this post, so that if your educational supervisor has missed out on things, you can prompt them, oh, I also did this. I also did this audit. I have presented this. And then they will write that in their education supervisor report, which is what ARCP panel will be reading. And then they'll be impressed by you. Okay. So don't feel shy we as IMGs, we are shy people. We do not know what to speak, when to speak. Sometimes even if we want to speak, we just want to keep quiet because that our background is like that. And most of us have come from a hierarchical system where we're not allowed to talk or express ourselves. But here they really like it. If you're boasting about yourself, it's okay. So do that. Then coming to reflections, good or bad, write reflections. You can either write it in a narrative way, if you prefer that, writing a narration, like a story, like a timeline, or you can write it splitting into parts, what happened, when happened, and what I have learned from it, just pointers. It's up to you. It is your skill. You can write it the way you want to write it. But do write reflections. You can also write good reflections, and you can also write reflections on the datexes that have been discussed, even if they did not involve you, because you have learned something from those things. Okay, and that will also count as a reflection. So write a few reflections, but good ones, before your ARCP, and try to spread them around so they know that you have been learning throughout the 6 months or 1 year, rather than at the end of the when the ARCP is close by. Also, if you have written reflections, it will give you an idea of what to write in the Form R as well, because when they ask for a Form R at the end, just before the ARCP, they want you to mention if there have been any complaints about you, any datexes, any concerns or issues that have been raised about your competencies or learning. So that all should come into the Form R. And if you can forget about these things, and sometimes you can miss them on Form R. So if you have written reflections already, that can be a guide for you to write on the Form R. I can give you my example. I was an ST4, a new ST4, and I was working in Peds A&E at the time. Because of COVID, it was all joined together, and we were helping out in Peds A&E. And a toddler came with some sort of accidental ingestion of something, and we had to do some bloods according to doc space. It was a difficult cannulation, difficult cannula, and my SHO had failed, so I had to go and do it. After I did the bleeding of the child, there was a big bruise. So mom had written a complaint in the complaint box. She hadn't gone to PALS, or the pediatric liaison service, patient liaison service, but she had just written a complaint feedback form saying that the doctors that did the cannula had left a bruise on it. My consultant spoke to that mom on phone and tried to make her understand that sometimes these things happen, but she was not taking any of it. And then my consultant came to me. She knew me. She knew that I had done everything in the goodwill of the patient. So she came to me and she told me what had happened. And I said to her that I am happy to speak to the mom myself on my behalf, as well as on my SHO's behalf. And then I will also write an apology letter to mom, which will make her feel at ease that she has been heard. So I wrote an apology letter to mom, and I also called that mom. And I had written that as a reflection afterwards, because, I had stepped in at a very junior level, only at an ST4 level, and I had spoken to that mum. So I wrote a reflection about it. But I forgot to mention it on my Form R. So at the time of ARCP, I got a phone call. I did not go for that ARCP because it was COVID times. I got a phone call from the ARCP panel saying, oh, you have made this very good reflection about what had happened there, but you haven't mentioned it in Form R. Until you mention it on Form R, your outcome will not be one. So we are holding off your outcome until you've mentioned it and updated your Form R. So do your reflections and then correlate your Form R with the reflections before your ARCP. That's another little tip from me. Now, yes, documents section and its organization. Someone was asking in the chat box as well how to make folders in the documents section. And I think Nadia had already replied to it. you can create a new folder. If you go to document section, on the right hand side, there is a bar which says create new folder, and you can create a new folder. I will recommend that have a very organized portfolio before your ARCP, which I learned with in West Midlands because they are very peculiar and particular about the portfolios. So we have ARCP folders for every year, which states ST1 ARCP 2020-2021, and then another folder saying ST2 ARCP 2021 to 2022, so that you have all the folders for every year of your training by the end of your training. Okay, and all the documents are collaborated into these folders. Inside the folders, you can have subfolders, which will say safeguarding folder, a life support training folder, teachings folder, or conferences folder. And then you can have all the certificates tied in, organized in a very nice way inside those subfolders, ready for the ARCP. What I do for my ARCPs is that although our APLS and our NLS are valid for 4 years, I shift them from one folder to the another until they are valid for the upcoming ARCP. So, for example, I did my NLS 2 years ago, and for this ARCP, I will still add the NLS certificate from my 2 years ago post and upload it to the ARCP folder for this session. Okay, so that the team who are looking at your, or the ARCP team who's looking at your portfolio knows and can see the evidence easily, rather than trying to find out in a haphazard way.
I was going to say there's a couple more minutes left for the talk.
Okay, okay.
Thank you.
Last point then. I think I have already covered it. MSF and reflection. So for us, our MSFs are very important. When you read your MSFs, you feel really happy that people are liking you. But sometimes there can be some comments in your MSF section which can say, oh, the communication is lacking and they need to work on their communication, or you need to work on this or that. If you have got any of that in your MSF, you can write a reflection on top of your MSF. And I will really recommend that you write that reflection saying that I have noted someone has commented that my communication is a little weak. And to improve that, I am going to go on a communication course, or I'm going to learn this skill. Okay. If you do those reflections, the ARCP team will know that you are recognizing your problems or your issues and you are dealing with them already, and they do not need to probe you. If you guys have any questions, I'm going to finish it here. If you guys have any questions, you can ask me if I have time, Vijan. Otherwise,
Yeah.
I will leave my email address in the chat box.
I think we were due to finish at 8. So I think the questions, what we might do is maybe email Mega directly. Really, really great, great reflections, great top tips. It reminded me of something actually, your talk, Mega. Just when I was a trainee, I had a colleague who didn't realize he was involved in an SI. And sometimes what can happen is an SI can happen. You can be named, but actually you're not directly involved in it. I think this case was a child who was intubated and there wasn't a CO2 and CO2 monitor, and the anaesthetist put in a serious incident about it, and he didn't realize. And as a result, he failed his ARCP as a result. So it's always useful at the end of when you come up to ARCP, asking your consultants if there are any serious incidences that had happened in the department, and then making sure that you weren't sort of named in them, maybe on the periphery as a bystander. And also, it was said earlier by Dr. Pute and by Emma that it's important to record down your sick days. And I think that's something, you know, it's so having a calendar, having a note, just writing down what days you were sick. Again, another colleague of mine forgot that he was off sick for 2 days and didn't put it on his R form. And it's things we don't think about. So those are important points, I think, to have too. I can see that Nadia's got a hand up. I think she wants to say something, Nadia.
Yeah, thank you. We'll run slightly over time, a couple of minutes, and thank you very much, Megan. And actually, they're really good tips. I just wanted to add 3 things actually very quickly. One of the things I found very useful was when I was in ST4, I just started training, although I had been a clinical fellow prior to that, was I joined an ARCP panel for the F1, F2 doctors. I was alongside consultants. They kind of put it out, any of the middle grade doctors who would like to join. And I had never experienced an ARCP. I had never been assessed myself, or I had never. So I went to understand how it actually works. And that was really, really useful, because that was useful for me in my first ARCP, because I understood what they're looking for. Although, yes, different levels, but I just understood the whole process. So I'd encourage you, if there's anything going on in your trust, just find out, see when they're happening. They will always want someone from the middle grade rota just to ask you a few questions. You will be completely supported and guided by the consultants. You won't be out there assessing people on your own, but it's just really useful to go on one of those, just to understand if you haven't had an ARCP before. The second tip, and I think it's been mentioned multiple times in this talk, about just making sure everything is quite meticulously in place, like your Form R. Recently, my last ARCP, I had obviously most of the time your education supervisor and your clinical supervisor are the same person. So my education supervisor filled out the report, and then there's a bit where you say, are you the clinical supervisor for this trainee? And then you tick yes, and another 4 or 6 questions come down, and she mistakenly ticked no. And I didn't, because, okay, she submitted it, and I looked through it very quickly. I'm a bit blasé with things sometimes. And I submitted, and I was very happy that for the first time I wasn't doing my portfolio at 2 a.m. on the deadline. Like, I had submitted on the Friday and I had the whole weekend off relaxing. And then I get this email on Monday morning or after the deadline from the panel that they'd given me an outcome of 5 because you don't have a clinical supervisor report, although it's on the same report. So then I started having the headless chicken mode activated, and thankfully my supervisor was very supportive. She filled it in straight away, and I got an outcome of 1 2 or 3 weeks later. But it's just be meticulous and look through it. The third thing I just wanted to mention, there's a colleague, of ours who, for those of you who speak Arabic, has a YouTube video. I think I can put it in the chat, who talking again about ARCP and portfolio. It might be useful for Arabic speakers. I'll put the link here if you want to have a look through it. He's a pediatric trainee in Sheffield, I think ST6 now, one of our colleagues, and he's made quite a nice video if you want to have a look at that. So that's all from me. Back to you, Bijan. Thank you very much, everybody. Yes.
So it's been a busy afternoon. It's been packed with some fantastic talks. I would like to take the opportunity on behalf of the Soft Landings team to thank our external speakers, and also thank our internal speakers as well for volunteering their free time to spread their wisdom. These sessions do not happen without a huge amount of planning. So also it's a big thank you to our hardworking team behind the scenes. Naomi for her leadership for the education section of Soft Landings, for Maureen for her superb technical skills and sorting out the QRL code, and for the feedback form, which I'll speak about in a second. Nadia and Habab for their tireless work, technical skills, working under pressure. Habab, especially for today, so well done to you both.
Thank you.
We are all passionate about international medical graduates for our own reasons. We want to grow and improve this Soft Landings project, and to do this we do need your input and your feedback. We did flash up that QRL code. I know some of you struggled to get it to load, but we will try and show it again at the end. But also Nadia, and if you don't mind, Nadia, putting it in the chat again, actually, so it's fresh, there is going to be a feedback form. We would really like to know what worked and what didn't work. What's positive, and it's also, you know, taking the negatives as well to try and improve these talks, because these talks are for you, and we want to make them the best that we can. The session has been recorded, and we will upload it onto the website once we get the website up and running. I am sorry that some of you missed the first talk. Again, this is all a learning experience for us, and we will strive to make sure that we can admit everybody to the talk on our next session. But on behalf of the Soft Landings team, I'd like to thank you all for taking your time this evening, and wish you all with your ARCPs and your training. And please do give us that feedback so we can know how we can support you and make your landing a soft night.
Thank you, Bijan. Thank you, Abraham. Here's again a reminder for the top tips for the ARCP.
Thank you very much, everyone.
I will leave you with a QR code. If you can please scan the code and just let us know your thoughts for the future events.
Sorry, Habab, how can I scan it directly from my phone?
I think when you put your camera towards the screen, there should be some option about scanning.
I think if you're
Here's
using,
you can take a
using your phone-
screenshot.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so you can take a screenshot of it, and then if you go to the function on your phone, there's a place where you can sorry, I'll just show you what that is. But just take a screenshot, and then I'll post
I got that.
how you can. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I will post something on the chat now that you can use.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And if you could all take the time to fill in the feedback form as well, which Nadia has put into the chat, that would be really, really helpful for us. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Bijan. Thank you.